Hello, I'm Robin Childs and this is my Broodhollow quilt. I've been working on this for a while and I'm pretty happy with it. It's the first quilt I've ever attempted and I did a lot of little itty bitty detail work on it that I just wanted to share. It's double-sided, so there is what I think of as the mostly harmless side and then the underbelly side. If you are unfamiliar with Broodhollow, then everything I'm going to say is probably going to make no sense whatsoever, and there absolutely will be spoilers. So I highly recommend taking a look at it. It's fantastic. I read it, I bought the PDF and the soundtrack, I think back in March. It was kind of like had been on my to-read list for a while, and I was like, I'm going to treat myself. I'm really glad I actually got the PDFs with the soundtrack, because there were some great like synchronicity moments where I was listening to the soundtrack and that hit a dramatic moment, and then the book hit a dramatic moment, and it was just it was a good reading experience. So I'll put a link down to the store and to the website, so if you haven't read it, you can read it, and then all of this will make sense. So let's talk about detail work. On the mostly harmless side, all of these patterns are patterns that I designed. I'd never made a repeating pattern before, so that was an exciting new thing to try out, and I'll put the images up on the screen a little bit more directly so you can actually see them. So the blue one, all these are objects that were utilized for part of Zane's warning system in book 2, where he was hanging all sorts of objects. I did add in the Broodhollow switch water. I always want to say stitch water, but I know that's wrong. I made a note so I would remember that that is wrong. It's switch water. I might have a bias for stitching things. Maybe. The red one I think of as the gateway square, because both the corkscrew and the door, or the door being closed, are pieces of, they're trigger points for memories, they're trigger points for events. But I specifically put in versions where the doors were open and where the corkscrew was bloody and not bloody, because these are kind of the gateways you don't want to open. It's a little bit like, it has a similar sentiment as like Ged in the Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin, where this is not a journey you want to go on. This is, you don't turn and pursue the shadow because you want to do that. That's not an adventure that you're looking forward to. You do it because the alternative is worse, and there's no way to become whole without doing it. But it's not something that you want to do. So the door being a little bit open, the corkscrew being clean, the nails representing nailing all that shut. I thought it was an interesting, the door being shut is actually which kind of the pattern, indulging in the pattern allows that process to happen, allows not the process to end, but the process to be perceived, the problem to be perceived. Anyway, I thought it was really interesting. A tiny little detail that I'm so happy it just barely showed up on the printed version is on the open door at the very top, there are two little eyes. The green pattern is the last pattern I did because it had the most complex overlap because of all the patterns in the back, and I was not sure if that would work, and I managed to make it work, and I'm really happy with it. In kind of contrast to the gateway red square, I think of the green square as storage of knowledge. And all of these are places where information is stored that makes that gateway actually useful in some way, or easier to access in some way. These are all gateway pieces from book 2, with a little bit from the pages of book 1. So we've got the journal, the new journal, the old journal, the ripped out pages from the journal, the encyclopedia that Zane uses, which is the AQ through AZ book out of the Encyclopedia Atlantica, and then the notes, which did not print, unfortunately. It's too fine a detail, but I know that it's there. Now you will know that it's there. The little notebook, which is Dr. Engstrom's notebook, each one of those pages has the exact same thing written on it in cursive, which is his recommendation to Zane to keep a journal, but I've put a different date on each one of the pages when it's visible, so each one of those little pages that have been ripped off and are floating away and getting crumpled up all have the exact same thing with a different date on it. I did my best to recreate the pages visible from the old journal are technically, oh no, that's on the new, that's the stuff that went into the new journal. Ah, well, maybe he replicated it twice. I'm not going to freak out myself about that detail too much. The symbols in the background were pulled from the dream that Zane has, where he's trying to piece things together, and he has this idea that he can remember things before his head starts to implode, you know, as you do. The purple one is, I think of as Mercy's square, because that's, for the most part, that's replicating pieces of Ouster Eve, with the tuning forks. The one detail inconsistency, which I must confess to, is that the moon is the wrong kind of moon. The clock time is correct, but I tried it with a full moon, the way that it is in book one, but visually I felt that really pulled away from Mercy, and I wanted the focus to be on our wonderful bat friend. So in the name of artistic license, I changed the moon to a crescent. I know, for shame. The yellow square I think of as the community square. We've got Mayor Osgood and his hat with his Deliverance Day thistle in honor of the town of 1,000 holidays. We've got Mrs. Iskith's hat as well, and then we've got their two separate societies. We've got the Ladies Auxiliary Meeting kind of group crest, and that's featured in the center of the quilt, and I will get to that. We'll get to why in a moment. And then we've also got the Society of the Skull and Shovels, all sort of knit together with thread and needle that also loops around. The reason that I wanted to have the Ladies Auxiliary crest featured in the middle of the square, like the middle square, the center square, and all the cloth utilizes this. This is all hand-stitched. I'm not a big fan of hand stitching, but but I did it anyways, and I have all the beat up calluses to prove it. My poor fingers. But I wanted to do this because the original idea for this that popped in my head is that I liked the idea of being a person's hem. That was an idea that really appealed to me. I have personally terrible memory issues. Because in part I have depression, and one of my brain's favorite things to do when I'm depressed is just start deleting data entirely. So the practice of having a hem, basically my husband Corey does that for me constantly, because I will be like, oh, I've never experienced this before, this is horrible, and he'll be like, no, you have experienced this, this is a repeating thought. So he provides me that context so I can put what I'm experiencing into a broader perspective, which often makes it feel a little less dire in the moment. So I loved that idea. That idea kind of led to wanting to do this project in the first place, and so that's why that crest is in the middle. So that is the mostly harmless side. On the side here we do have this, which sort of creeps to the back and does go over to the underbelly side, and I'm going to flip that over and show that to you in a moment. So this is the underbelly side. I tried to, the effect I was going for was I wanted each level to look like it was a little farther away, dragging to a central hole. The degree to which I was successful, I don't know. Maybe a more experienced quilter could have done that idea more effectively, but I'm still pretty pleased with how it turned out. This is a crushed satin fabric, which was driving me insane because it is really fragile, and trying to sew that so that it wouldn't fray and fall apart was not working, and I was just about to lose my mind about it. But then I realized that since it's polyester, it can be burned on the edges, which will seal them so it won't fray, and it makes for this much more varied look anyway, so that's awesome, and it turned out way better than I expected it to, so I'm very pleased with that piece. And it's shiny, which is nice. The sigils, glyphs, symbols, whatever you want to call them, whatever fancy word you want to use, these are all taken from the last few pages of book 2. Wherever possible, I chose them based on groupings. So grouping of 5, grouping of 5, grouping of 3 and 3, 1 and 1. The only grouping I had to break up was a grouping of 6. I tried to keep everything vertically aligned because that's how they are presented. I did ask if there were any that should not be placed next to each other, and was told that that was not an issue. I just realized that I did not ask about blood. So that, in retrospect, may have been something I should have asked for, but, you know, what's the fun of making a slightly odd quilt if you can't maybe possibly make it cursed? You know, just a little curse. I'm sure it'll be fine. So those are self-explanatory for the most part. There is this little detail here. Down on the corner we have Harker's signature stitch. And from a distance, I'm sure that that white fabric looks like just a plain white, but it actually has all these tiny little snowflakes on it. I was going to just do a plain white. Everything else is a plain gray. But when I saw that white in the store, I knew that I had to get it. So everything is on a snowbank, which just seems that much more perfect and appropriate. Overall, I had a blast working on this project. Quilting is new to me, but now I know how to do it. Maybe should have started with a less ambitious project, but, you know, my common sense and my ambition have never really been on speaking terms. So, nah, I learned a lot. It turned out well enough. There's a little, I'm not going to let it bother me. Okay, it's going to bother me a little bit, but, you know, it's mostly straight. It's mostly good enough, and I am excited to hang it up and have a spooky, neat, awesome quilt for a spooky, neat, awesome story in my house. So, thanks so much. I hope you've enjoyed this dive into the details. I'm a bit of a detail freak, and I don't let myself be excited about things very often, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to try being excited about something and unapologetically liking something, and that's what this is about. So, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.